Chapter 28. Hours passed. Desimone sat at the back of the cage with her knees drawn to her chest, trying hard not to break into tears again, as all the stories she'd ever heard about dragons whisking away young virgins to be stripped of their flesh and devoured spun through her mind. Oh, if only Galloway would reach her in time. Surely he'd ride off to rescue her immediately. If he rescued her, she'd throw her doubts to the wind and take him as her husband. After all, he was a knight through and through, handsome, experienced, charismatic. Everyone loved him. Though she knew this in her head, her stomach twisted at the thought of marrying him. There was just something wrong. What is the matter with you, Desimone? If he rescues you, won't it prove he's worthy of you? She squeezed her eyes shut and tried to envision herself in white, walking up the aisle in the city's cathedral, looking into his eyes and... I can't do it. Desimone snapped her eyes open. I can't. What's wrong with me? The sound of wind beats, like a great cloth being snapped in the wind, pounded through the air. The dragon was back. Desimone cowered at the back of the cage. Surely this time he'd devour her, and all her musings about Galloway would come to naught. Can't you tell me anything? Came the sound of a perfectly human voice. No, said a deeper, more gravelly voice. It's a surprise. You'll love it, but it's not quite ready, so stay out here a moment. With a gasp, Desimone scrambled to her feet. Could it be? Had people discovered the cave? Perhaps lured here by the dragon's gold. Yes, that must be it. If such souls would brave the dragon to retrieve the gold, surely they would release her before the dragon returned. She would reward them handsomely if they did. She rushed to the front of the cage. Help! Help! Someone please help me! Her hope died on her lips when the dragon thrust his head into the cave and made a gesture remarkably like putting a finger to his lips to shush her. What was that? A young man, an honest-to-goodness human her age, stepped into the cave. His eyes fell on her immediately. Your Highness? Eyes widening as he looked at her, his mouth fell open, blood rushing from his face. And then, Desimone didn't know what to make of it, he flushed a violent shade of purple and swung around to the dragon with clenched fist. You kidnapped her? No, the dragon waved his paws. I didn't. If you didn't kidnap her, why is she in a cage? The young man scrambled onto the ledge. It was temporary, the dragon said, watching him. I had to keep her from running off and getting herself lost. She wouldn't be lost if you didn't kidnap her. I didn't. Oh, shut up, you overgrown worm. The dragon put a claw to his chest. Hurtful? Your Highness, I am so sorry. The young man gripped the bars of the cage. Are you harmed? What are you doing? Desimone pointed. The dragon, it's right there. The dragon, the young man snorted through his nose. It's been nothing but a nuisance since the day I met it. A nuisance? The dragon gave a pout. A little harsh, don't you think? I'm being gracious. You've burnt my field, destroyed my city, kidnapped my princess. What would you call it? Sounds bad when you put it that way. The dragon scratched his cheek with a claw. It's bad however you put it. Keep in mind I was doing it for you. The dragon pointed at him. For the record, I did not kidnap her. The young man rolled his eyes. Your Highness, I can't apologize enough. He opened the cage to release her. It didn't hurt you, did it? He offered his hand to help her. Desimone blinked as she took his hand. The cage wasn't even locked? She had been too frightened to try it. I beg your pardon. I'm a bit confused. Are you having a conversation with this dragon? Depends on what you mean by conversation. The young man crossed his arms. I talk, it responds, but it doesn't listen to a word I say. And vice versa. The dragon sat on its haunches. Then you weren't roaring. Desimone scrutinized the dragon. You were talking. Of course, the dragon snorted. I'm a dragon. To think I just roar like a common beast incapable of speech is stereotypical nonsense. You ought to be ashamed, princess. Desimone blinked. In all her years, nothing like this had ever happened to her before. So she fell back on what her mother had taught her about meeting someone from a foreign land. I'm terribly sorry to have offended you. She dropped a curtsy. I beg your forgiveness, dragon. Don't apologize to it. The young man shot a glare at the dragon. It kidnapped you. I did not. The dragon turned up its nose. I think you're just saying it to upset me now. Then what is she doing here? The young man said. I went to her castle to invite her to tea. The dragon sniffed. All she did was scream in my face. Quite rude, if you ask me. To be fair, you are the same dragon who has been destroying my city and terrorizing my people, Desimone pointed out. How was I to know you weren't trying more of the same? A good point, my lady. The dragon waved a paw in the air. Which is one of the reasons I wanted to invite you to tea, as an apology for what I have done. I did it all for this human's benefit, you see. You? Desimone turned to the young man. Why should a dragon feel the need to help you? The young man inhaled through his teeth. It's a long story. One I will be happy to tell, the dragon bowed. By your leave, princess. I should be happy to hear it, Desimone said. Don't encourage it. The young man buried his face in his hands. The dragon settled itself down as if it were about to tell a good story. It all started when this human saved my life. You saved his life? Desimone gazed at the young man with new interest. How does one save the life of a dragon? The young man wrapped his arms around himself. I freed it from a trap. It was an awful device, your highness. The dragon placed a paw on his forehead. The torturous pain was excruciating. Look what it did to my leg. He extended a back leg to show off a ring of metal around it. Desimone cocked her head. It turned your leg into metal. Oh no, the dragon chuckled to itself. I forgot I put this thing on. He pried the metal from his leg to expose a scaleless ring around it. How awful! Desimone pressed her hand against her mouth. Does it hurt much? It did. The dragon nodded for emphasis. Such pain I had not felt in all my life. Haven't your scales grown back yet? The young man hopped off the ledge to examine it. My scales won't grow back until I molt, which will take months. The dragon tucked his leg underneath its body. I took inspiration from your people to create the metal ring, but it is uncomfortable. I had to protect myself somehow. The trap was the most barbaric thing I'd ever seen, your highness. It nearly cut the dragon's leg clean off. The young man pressed his lips together. I can't imagine the sort of cruel person who would come up with such a thing. Desimone let her eyes drop. She could. He was one of her top suitors, and she had approved of it. As I said, the human saved my life, the dragon continued. As one does when one's life is saved, I said I would grant him a wish. Can you do that? Desimone lowered herself to a seat. Do dragons work magic or something? More or less, the dragon shrugged. You'd be surprised what she can buy with the magic of gold. I see. Desimone turned to the young man. What did you wish for then? The young man's face flushed, his ears turning bright red. It's not important to the story. Your hand, the dragon said. My hand? It was a jest, the young man said, but the dragon spoke over him. He's madly in love with you, you know. The dragon grinned at her. You should have heard how he gushed about you. The young man hid his face in his hands. If I were a night dragon, I'd thrust a sword in your cold heart right now. So, Desimone smirked at the young man. You wish to marry me, is that it? No, the young man jerked his head up. Yes, everyone wants to marry you, princess. You have a lot of suitors. Desimone's smile faded. Yes, I do. I know I can never be worthy of you. The young man gazed at her with such adoration it made Desimone's cheeks color. The way he looked at her, the way his eyes smiled and sparkled, it reminded her of someone else, someone she held in high regard. She averted her eyes. Once he said he wanted your hand, I came up with a plan for him to win it. The dragon waved his hand as he spoke. I cause a little mayhem, your father offers your hand in exchange for getting rid of me, the human slays me, and bam, instant princess for what was the term? A bride? That was your plan? Desimone slammed her fist on her lap. You destroyed my city for that? What if I didn't want to marry him? My sentiments exactly, the young man crossed his arms. Don't act all high and mighty. Desimone turned her fury to him next. He was acting at your behest. Without my knowledge or consent. The young man glared at the dragon. I told you he doesn't listen to a word I say. Indeed. The dragon raised his nose in the air. When I told him about my plan, he started whining about how it was deceitful and demeaning, blah, blah, blah. The young man glared at the dragon, but a smile tugged at his lips. Oh, come now, dragon. You came around once I explained it, which is why I can't understand why you would do something like kidnap her. I did not. The dragon paused to take a calming breath. You deserve a chance to display for your princess. What's the human term for it? To court her. He leaned in close to Desimone. You won't find another human as honorable as he, my lady. I'm afraid I'll have to disagree with you there, dragon. Desimone took a deep breath. I once met someone who no one can top in terms of honor. Why not give the human a chance? The dragon smiled at her. Even if nothing comes of it, I guarantee you won't regret it. Very well, dragon, Desimone smiled. I shall accept your invitation for tea. Wonderful. The dragon rose to his feet. I flew all the way to the sea to get this particular blend. You and the human will love it. Can you please stop calling me the human? The young man reached up to help Desimone off the ledge. It's condescending. What else am I supposed to call you? The dragon looked over his shoulder. You never gave me your name. You never gave me yours. The young man shrugged as Desimone hopped off the ledge. I've been calling you dragon this whole time. It seems introductions are in order. Desimone stood in the midst of them. I shall go first. I am Desimone, Princess of Lauphah, she curtsied. I am Tiscophanes. The dragon placed his hand on his chest and bowed. You may call me Tesco. The young man raised a finger. I'm Sevrin, son of Timuron, farmer. Desimone glanced at him. Sevrin? She knew the name, but from where? Oh yes, it was the name of the young man who had stepped up to speak at the meeting she held in her castle. Now that introductions have concluded, Tesco motioned them toward the interior of the cave, where a low stone table had been set with a human-sized tea set. Next to 2 porcelain teacups sat an intricately carved jade teacup the size of a bucket. This is the most extraordinary thing to have ever happened in my life. Desimone had to chuckle at her situation. That or I'm going completely mad. Maybe it's a little of both, Sevrin said as he walked beside her. Desimone smiled at him. She could almost see what the dragon was talking about, a streak of honorable humility which lay beneath the surface of this young man. But more than that, there's something in his manner, the way he held himself, which made her heart pound and butterflies split in her stomach. Something familiar about him. She sat at her place next to him, watching him through one eye. If it was the last thing she did today, she would find out why looking at him made her feel as safe and warm as if she was in her own bed.